and at the end I'm going to give you a call to action. So anyway, years ago, there was a lot of noise in Colleyville because they were planning a train station down the street from me. And at first it sounded like a really good idea. But then the more we learned about it, the more we realized it was really dumb. The study showed that people from Colleyville weren't going to ride it. So our city council was going to need to buy buses to bus in people from other cities to boost ridership enough to justify it. It was going to cost us $1 million a year to maintain something that we weren't going to ride. There were plans for a high-rise apartment building at the train station. Colleyville has never allowed apartments in our city, but we were going to do this to accommodate the train station.
Oh my God.
So there were factions all over Colleyville. People were saying, we have to do something about this. And we were just shut out of all the discussion. They would have community meetings, and we weren't allowed to voice our questions out loud. We had to write them down on a piece of paper, so then they would go research them and then put them on their website, the answers. So there was no discussion about it. So it was horrifying the way that it was happening, and we knew it was just going to be pushed upon us. So I kept saying, somebody should do something. Somebody should do something. Come on, somebody. Because I had kids. I didn't want to get involved in politics. And pretty soon I realized there was no one who was going to do this if I didn't do it. So I started to hold meetings, get the groups together. We started to work. We wrote our own ordinance. We did a petition drive. What happened was really neat. It didn't have to go to the vote. We caused so much trouble for the city council that they signed our ordinance into law without a vote on it. So that was a huge victory. But but during the process, we realized not just was the station terrible, the entire train project was awful. And we said, if taxpayers understood this project, there is no way they would allow this to happen. Because it was, again, their studies showed in the entire county, we weren't going to ride it. Their studies showed that it was the ridership, the amount of cars that they were going to take off the road was so small that it was statistically insignificant. And then when you combine that with the traffic congestion at the intersections of the roadways, it turns out it was creating more congestion than it was solving at a massive and ongoing expense to taxpayers. So then I said, I guess I don't get to quit yet. I still have a job to do. So, and the first thing that I did was, we knew Vicki Truitt was one of the people who was pushing for it, so we got a candidate to run against her. And, but there's still people pushing it at the government level. So, Chris Putnam has a lot more details, and he's going to lay it all out for you so you can see exactly what the plan is. And then again, at the end, I'll tell you what you can do about it, because we do have a strong call to action. We need help. He and I can't stop it alone, but if we all get involved and make noise, they could lose their funding. So anyway, please give a warm welcome to Chris Putnam.
Natalie is actually, for anybody who's from the Northeast Tarrant area, she's really an iconic activist. She was a fantastic area leader, and come local election time, she's not just sitting back. I mean, she's knocking on doors and helping people understand, who the right candidates are. And on this issue in particular, I mean, she is the first one that shined a light on what's going on here. So thank you, Natalie. Thank you. So by way of personal introduction, I'm Chris Putnam. I've actually been on Colleyville City Council for 10 months now. And as Josh mentioned, I am a proud son of Arlington, Wimbish Elementary, Shackleford Junior High, Lamar High School class of '87. My wife was also class of '87. Went to TCU, came back to Arlington, left about 15 years ago. So all told, this is my hometown. I grew up here, spent 32 years in town, and it's really exciting to come back and to be able to talk to the group. And I know there's a lot of other interesting issues going on in Arlington as well. Super proud of what Kelly and Faith have been doing. And I actually see Faith quite a bit, at various events, and we talk about these two issues because they're really similar, and that there are so many hidden factors that most of our government representatives who are otherwise claiming to be Republican just don't want folks to know about. So, by trade, I actually am an executive in a company that we built from $10 million to a $2 billion public company, and part of that job is spend a lot of time evaluating business cases and business cases that are based on empirical data to plot investments. And so as we started really digging into TEXRAIL, a lot of interesting questions came up about why we're actually contemplating this investment, as well as the impacts it's going to have on the larger community. So when I show you the data tonight, in this presentation, all but one slide is data completely from the Fort Worth Transportation Authority or the North Central Texas Council of Governments. It is not my data. It's not my supposition. It's not my assumptions. It is their hard data, which we can provide you links to. Go ahead. So the first thing that I should probably mention is TEXRAIL is not the high-speed rail system that you hear about, that's being promoted between DFW and Houston, Austin, San Antonio. This is the commuter line between downtown Fort Worth and DFW Airport, a 27-mile section of funding. And we know right now that there's a lot of conversation about transportation budgets and spending, in the state of Texas. That's what Proposition 1 was all about. And Proposition 1 was very explicit in the fact that those monies that were being diverted from rainy day fund to transportation were not to be used for rail or transit, but to build roads. And what's interesting is even in liberal Austin, they just had an election on commuter rail, and it lost overwhelmingly by 14 points. And the principal reason it lost is the reason that Natalie mentioned, and I'm going to show you the data. It is too much money for too little impact. And even down in Austin, they can understand that it's a tiny benefit with an extraordinary cost. When you really start digging in and we start understanding why certain people want to invest in these things, I think it'll become a little bit clearer. Next slide. So again, 27-mile commuter rail between downtown and the airport. Interestingly, and this is also really important to understand, TEXRAIL is not light rail like DART. It's diesel-powered locomotives, and there's a reason for that. And that is because the dirty secret of TEXRAIL is that it's also going to be used for expanded commercial freight. So when I show you how much money the taxpayers are going to spend to redevelop this rail line, it amounts to nothing short of corporate welfare. The railroads and the T and the DART are ultimately going to benefit by these massive investments the taxpayers are making. And as Natalie pointed out, no benefit from a clean air or transportation point of view. Ultimately, the cost of this line, just the capital cost to deploy it, is $27 million a mile. So next slide, I'll show you the details. Actually, this is what started in 2009 in the city of Colleyville. This is a resolution that actually supported the implementation of passenger rail service in Tarrant County and also advocated for increased fuel taxes, gas taxes, motor vehicle registration fees, anything associated with an automobile to pay for it. And in Colleyville, which is actually fairly conservative politically, this resolution passed 7-0. Wow. Including several folks that are up for election in May, fortunately. This was Vicki Truitt inspired. She pimped this thing all over the Metroplex, got a lot of people signed on to it. Wow. Go ahead. Here's the funding. This is the big insult. So the taxpayer literally gets insulted at every single level of government. $450 million from the federal government, almost $100 million from the state, from the Texas Mobility Funds, and then Tarrant County, we're all paying for it from a Tarrant County point of view, and then certain cities are paying a lot through sales tax as well. So today, they don't have this money. It was in the paper this week that in Obama's 2016 budget, he allocated $100 million for this project. So they're $300 million short on the federal side right now, and what we're trying to do is rally our state representatives to kill the state funding, because if we can kill the state funding, we kill TEXRAIL, period. They won't be able to, it'll send a message to the federal government that we don't want it, and so don't waste your money. By the way, that $800 million, that's just the cost to deploy. That does not reflect the actual operating cost to run the train. I'll show you some data on that. Go ahead. So again, this is Fort Worth Transportation Authority data. This commuter rail in Dallas-Fort Worth does not work today. For the TRE, the Texas Railway Express, the train that we have in Fort Worth that's operated by the T, Ridership has declined for 5 straight years. And that's at a period where we've had explosive population growth. As you can see, the population's increased 47%, and in the meantime, ridership on the TRE is down 25% that same period. It's actually, I think now to what, about 2001 or 2 levels. So it's going just completely backwards. And honestly, the same thing is happening in Dallas. And they're plowing more and more dollars into DART in Dallas, and they're redirecting money that they would use for other public transportation, things that might be needed, like busing, to extend the train system like out into the suburbs. And it's just creating a massive amount of debt for DART. And the operating losses there actually pale, or they're 10 times worse than what we see here. But this is where we're gonna head that way with TEXFAIL. This is the next insult. This is the one that Natalie was referencing, and really read the last sentence. And again, this is their data. These are their words verbatim from their environmental impact study. This thing does not solve any traffic problem at all. At all. And in fact, it might actually increase traffic. Last sentence, the commuter rail alternative, has negligible effects on traffic patterns and volumes on parallel roadways, and the same is true for crossing as well. If you actually wanted to study that chart, it's showing you, the difference between not building and building the train. And if you just go up and down the numbers, it's a joke. And by the way, that's a 30-year projection. So they're projecting out 30 years. Go ahead. This is vehicle miles traveled, vehicle hours traveled. Same story. And this is actually the data, and again, their language, not mine, that there is no significant improvements on air quality or congestion. Again, it's a diesel train. And consequently, all the reasons that you'll hear these politicians, particularly our county commissioners, sell this project is our population's exploding. We can't build enough roads, to handle all the traffic. We have an air problem. And yet all of their data says conclusively that this investment does absolutely nothing to solve either of those problems. This is the T's financial statement. So again, as a business guy, this is the first thing that I looked for. Like, how do they either make money or lose money? And it's shocking. So the punchline is they lose $67 million a year today before TEXRAIL. 67 million taxpayer dollars a year. As you can see in the upper right or upper left-hand side, they actually take in for fares for the T $7.8 million. So that's against, they're literally losing, an extraordinary amount of money. And where it comes from is taxpayer contributions, which is what you see on the right side. And they have really clever names for, all these various taxpayer contributions. They'll call things like non-operating revenue. Well, that's tax money coming out of some city's general fund to help pay for it. Contributions from partners, that's what that reflects. Sales tax, so in most of the cities like Grapevine and Fort Worth, they actually kick sales tax over to the T to fund these operations. And again, what's the dynamic that's going to happen here with TEXRAIL is this loss, this annual operating loss, will just continue to accelerate. Yes, sir.
Just for the record, Arlington City Council approves $237,000 per year.
For the TRE. Yes. Mm-hmm. That's right. It comes out of the general fund. We pay for it too in Colleyville. Now this is the one slide that I mentioned. It's my data. So what's impossible to get from these government authorities or these quasi-governmental authorities, government corporations, whatever we're calling them, is the actual amount of the taxpayer subsidy. So what does it actually cost the taxpayer on a per passenger basis? So I did this math myself. So today on the TRE, if you take basically their total annual ridership and you divide it, by the Tarrant County population, basically what it's saying is 1/3 of 1% of Tarrant County residents actually use these trains. And it's actually lower than that. It's probably half that, because the people that do use them are commuters that are traveling 2 ways. And so it's really the same person. They don't count it, they count every single ride separately, not every individual, obviously. So the real answer here is probably 0.15% today, and going down as we saw in the previous slides. If you take their forecast, their own forecast, and project them out, by the way, their forecasts are completely bogus. Because I'll guarantee you that there's no way that when they were projecting TRE ridership 12 years in the future, they saw it going down for 5 straight years. So, but if you do take their own forecast, and again, you do not assume a commute, it's still less than 1%. 0.72%. The reality of that is probably more like 0.4%. So $800 million, tens of millions of dollars of annual operating costs, massive losses to service something probably on the order of 0.5 of 1% of Tarrant County residents. Now, wouldn't we rather have that money to go build more roads?
Yes.
Non-toll roads?
Comparing the ones we got.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so then the subsidy, and this is actually a very conservative subsidy calculation. I only took five years at, again, their ridership projections, and I took the capital bill costs. No operating costs went into my subsidy model. And basically what it says is that for every single time that somebody steps on one of those trains, we pay $45. $45.
Good Lord.
Now, in those cities that have these sorts of systems, the taxpayer subsidy is actually more like $90. I actually think it is going to be here as well, because again, it's back to this math of a round trip, right? The people that use them are principally commuters. So imagine that, $90, whether it's 45 or 90, it's still horrible.
Right.
I mean, you could buy somebody a tank of gas. We could build a lot of roads. Natalie mentioned the community impact. This is really why we first got involved. I mean, this is less relevant, you know, it's more relevant in Colleyville, but statistically, property values decline precipitously. We're talking about 50 plus trains a day traveling at 70 miles an hour. It creates a safety problem, traffic problem, obviously a noise problem. And again, if there was a benefit to it, then maybe you could make some of these arguments, but there's not. So who does benefit? DART owns the right-of-way. The T leases it from them. They're going to run commercial freight traffic on them. So those guys are obviously all benefiting, right? Interestingly, Fort Worth and Grapevine are really kind of the worst offenders here. They want it for economic development purposes. So, you know, Betsy Price wants it to bring people from DFW Airport down to downtown Fort Worth because they've made a lot of investments in this new arena that they're contemplating, and of course, the Trinity River Vision, which is a subject for another meeting. The second biggest waste of money in Tarrant County. So, you know, what's interesting is, you know, when you actually start to talk to Republican legislators about why would you ever support this, the first thing out of their mouths is, well, of course, you know, we need alternative transportation solutions. And then you actually explain to them the data that says that, well, this doesn't actually solve that problem, and that they just absolutely have nothing else to say. And my conclusion is they actually don't know. You know, most of the state reps that I met with a lot of them, including Connie, by the way, from Colleyville. And until they saw this data, they had no idea. And unlike Austin, nobody here is going to get to vote on this. The MPO, the NC, the NetCog, and the RTC are going to shove this down our throats, and that is not representative government. That is federal bureaucrats. And I'll look right at the camera and call out Michael Morris, who somehow is like the most powerful guy in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, is accountable to no voter. And it's offensive. So why should Arlington Tea Party care? So here's some of the progress we made so far. Natalie secured a resolution from the Tarrant County GOP formally opposing TEXRAIL. It was a big deal, right? And then I had a debate with Judge Glenn Whitley at the Tarrant Assembly. James was there helping us, and I'll let him maybe provide some commentary on how that went, but let's just say it wasn't even close. Because once people really start getting educated on the facts here, it's just like, what are we even talking about? This shouldn't even be a discussion. Our own state GOP platform opposes publicly funded passenger rail. Again, a lot of discussion around Prop 1. With the game that Michael Morris and his buddies are playing now is the money that was already scheduled for transit and rail, they've now pushed into other funding buckets so they can move the Prop 1 money for roads, but it didn't go away. They just playing a shell game with it and moving and shifting it around. They actually want to continue to throw more and more and more money at these transit systems that don't work. Clay Jenkins, a huge fan of this project, as are all liberals and Democrats, except in Austin apparently. This is Obama's stimulus money. How any Republican representative, federal, state, county, local, can in good conscience take this money from the federal government and apply it to this project is beyond me. Beyond me. That is the ultimate in Republican hypocrisy. And there's plenty of that around here, as we all know. We talked about the COG and the RTC. Most of this we've already covered. So I'm gonna let Natalie now give you a couple of thoughts on what we can do about this, and then I'll wrap up.
Right. So anyway, I'm so glad that Chris Putnam got involved and helped because it was dying. I was exhausted, no one was helping, and he said, hey, we're going to start talking about this again. So he's my hero. Anyway, so, you know, we mentioned a few times that it was stopped in Austin, and I think something really interesting that's a great lesson for us is it was the Democrats that stopped this in Austin because they said, what are you talking about? This is not for us. They already had a train system and they wanted to add to it. And they said, we don't write it. This isn't benefiting us. We want that tax money used for other purposes. This is for businesses. We get that. Corporatism. So I feel like if the Democrats down in Austin could stop that, certainly we can stop it here. We're such a Republican stronghold or a conservative stronghold. So there's a few things that we can do, and I have this piece of paper that I want to give to everybody so you'll have points about why it's bad, some things that we didn't even cover. And there.
The next slide, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. And so also, I think because we were making, let me back up a second. So we have someone who helped with our effort to stop the train station who's a lobbyist in DC. He's been loosely helping us on the side, and he said in DC, they think there's strong community support for this. If they get a whiff that there's trouble, they will not give you the funding. And he said, you guys have to start making noise. That's the way to stop it. So I think because we were making, and what they do is they'll have little windows where you get to comment. They'll give you a little link to go comment on, and they say, no one commented that they didn't want this. Because we don't even know when they put the links out. So I think because we've been making the noise lately, they opened up a new window for us, and we have till February 23rd to comment at this link. Please comment.
What link?
And I'm going to give it to you. It's on this paper.
I'm like, give me.
So we have a link, and we have an 800 number that we can call. So we need to do that, and then additionally, we really have to push, especially these people who are saying it's wonderful, like Betsy Price, Mayor Tate, your mayoral candidates here. They need to know that this is nonsense. They shouldn't do it. And not only should they not do it, they need to speak out and speak out publicly against it. We're also going to build a website where we want to put on there all of our elected officials and what their opinion is. And they're all going to try to give us wishy-washy answers. And we're going to tell them, if you ignore us, that's approval. Silence equals approval of this project. And we want to know who's against it. And we're going to mail that out to voters during the next campaign and let them know. Because this is not funny what they're trying to do here. So anyway, okay, I think that's everything, and I'm going to hand this out to you, and please help us, because we can't make enough noise, just the two of us, but you guys know, I'm sure you're all talking about calling for different issues. This is a huge one. If you can call, if you can post it on Facebook, get friends to call, that's how we'll stop it. Do you have a question?
Yes, on this slide, I see some familiar names, obviously, but a couple missing that I'd like to know if they're also in support of, and that would be like Matt Rinaldi, Matt Krause.
If you talk to any of them and they say that they're opposed to it, let us know, because as I said, we're going to put that website together. We'd like to get statements directly from them that we can put on it.
Yeah, we're just super careful about not adding names of folks that we haven't, that
Okay.
somebody in our group hasn't been in touch with yet, either directly or indirectly. I'll tell you, Connie's looking at it right now really closely. It is important to get folks like that, engaged, and we have had a lot of, in the past 6 months in particular, a renewed awareness, by our state reps. Interestingly, the people that are for this thing will tell you, why are state reps getting involved? This only affects the cities that are impacted. I'm like, well, if you pay federal income taxes and state income taxes and county taxes, we're all stakeholders.
One more comment. Arlington is obviously pro-rail because they've already shoved bicycle lanes down our throat. What was the other stuff? Red light cameras.
Yeah, of course.
You know, they're very pro-green. They even had a bus program initiated, get this, they were doing a test pilot program, and they decided for 2 years they would have all the fares be free and see if that would work. Still nobody, still nobody rides
Yeah, of
it.
course.
You know, so
They actually changed that and actually charged.
they did,
They did.
and I bet their ridership went down,
The
didn't it?
ridership never came anyway.
Oh, okay.
I got one last slide. So
Okay,
it's-
sorry.
No,
I'll
I'm
shut up.
sorry if you were.
No, I'm
We can
good.
take questions.
Center point to.
Is there not one more? Yeah, so
Oh.
it's always interesting to understand how liberals think, right? So part of what we're trying to do to like raise awareness is challenge the Fort Worth Star-Telegram because they are 100% in the bag for the tea. And so I go at it with Twitter constantly with Bud Kennedy. We had another one today, all day long, because it actually Empower Texans published an excellent article on this very subject today that you all should read. We'll get you the link to it. But this is the logic, right? So basically, this is how they think. You're arguing false premise that the numbers have to work. We just want it as an amenity. Well, that's nice. I wish we could all afford billion-dollar amenities that absolutely accomplish nothing. What did he say to me today? I can't remember. It was interesting though. So if you're on Twitter, check that out.
Good.
Anyway, thank you all so much.
By the way, Natalie did present that resolution to the county commissioners court.
Okay. That's right, I saw that, yeah.
Well, there was only one commissioner who actually was trying to bring up the questions on this issue, and that was our commissioner.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
All right, you had it there, I think, in the very first slide, where the money was coming from, the federal and the state and so forth like that. Do we have any inkling as to how much of our gasoline tax money that's supposed to go towards roads is getting diverted to this crap?
No, but you can bet it is.
Oh, I know it is, but I mean, I just kind of wonder if we knew how much.
I don't. And what's interesting is, again, we didn't really talk about the operating expense because I don't know it, and they're not telling you. I mean, they'll give you some vague numbers, 10+ million a year. I don't believe them.
It's understated.
Of course.
You know,
But when the problem starts getting bigger, the cost problem, because once these things are, by the way, this is why bureaucrats love these things, like people at the T, and because this is job security forever. Forever. And actually, the guy that they hired is a guy from Nashville that was successful getting commuter rail implemented there. He made his 7 figures out there, heads over here. We're paying him over $300,000 a year just in salary to get this thing done now, and there's dedicated lobbyists on this.
Oh, yeah.
And I have somewhat of an answer for you. I know at the time we were working on the rail station issue, we found out that 40% of our gas tax money was being diverted for nothing to do with roadways. And some of it was rail, some was cemetery beautification, refurbishing offices. So it's going all over where it shouldn't.
I think that actually there is some public data on that from DART. And I was looking at it with TFR just the other day, actually, and there's a massive diversion to rail.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's at the federal level on
No, that's
diversions, or is that
at
state?
the local level.
State gas tax.
All right, Bill Zedler, get to work on it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to, did you say 40%?
40%
Diversion?
of our, yes.
For different purposes, not all for mass transit, but for other things other than college.
Yeah.
Isn't that the way they always do it, to be honest with you? Well, they talk us into these taxes, we vote for them, and then the money ends up going someplace else.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I believe is going on with Prop 1 money now. So the actual dollars that leave the rainy day fund to go for transportation, yes, they will be probably used for roads and they will be earmarked as Prop 1. The rest of the money that was slated for transit just goes into a different bucket.
Kelly, if I can go back to what you mentioned earlier about the buses, the little experimental bus thing.
Yeah,
Their original deal was they were going to dip Dan Dykert buses and use Dan Dykert buses. And they were going to, that's when it was going to be a freebie. But the T said, not the T, excuse me, DART said, no,
DART.
you can't do that. We won't let them pull up at our train stations. You'll have to use.
that I
buses.
did not know. Wow.
It's a transportation cartel that just lives off sucking the blood out of taxpayers. And
Good
the
Lord.
loss gets bigger and bigger and bigger every year.
Wow.
Just real quick, we just had a conversation about this. The conversation of DART Terry ridership has declined.
And then the answer, MYOB, most people probably don't know that that means mind your own business.
Yeah,
That's-
he's telling me
that's
mind my
the-
own business.
That's the reply to somebody asking a straightforward question about a fact. Mind your own business.
Yeah.
Shut up, go away.
We try to challenge these guys as publicly as possible. They actually, the Fort Worth Star Telegram wrote an editorial board editorial about what I was up to. There's nothing in that editorial about the data. It was all about me. This guy's causing trouble. We can't let this happen. And I'm like, why don't you write an article? I offered Bud today. I'm like, he's got that Sunday morning TV show. I said, let's go get Paul Ballard from the T, and let's sit down on TV Sunday morning, let's talk about it.
Chris, there are at least 3
Yeah.
former Star Telegram reporters and/or editorial board members working for the county.
Nah,
Are,
we know they're in the bag.
are you working with Terry Hall?
No,
You should be.
yeah.
I've been talking.
Transportation.
Because
He's
one
amazing.
thing that I'm trying to tell her, because I called her early on 5 years ago when we started this, and she said, my issue's toll roads, I think rail's good. And I said.
What?
Well, that back then she did, I think she's changed now.
Yeah.
And because she thought it would help not, to help her toll road issue somehow. But now we've brought to her attention that more rail equals more tolls, because it's robbing those transportation funds that should be used to paying for free roads and causing us to have to fund our roads with tolls.
That's exactly what's going on in Dallas.
Right, so I'm trying to partner with
Wow.
her, and she's getting it. So, and you know,
Okay.
something else I want to mention that's interesting is 5 years ago, they said, we have to have this for traffic, because you're not going to be able to move in this area in 10 years, because we have such an influx of people. Well, then when we show them the numbers don't say it's going to improve traffic congestion, then they quit talking about that, and now they start saying it's for economic vitality. I have no idea what that means.
They always default when they have no data support in their conclusion to economic development. And that's where I'm just like, look, I'm in the economic development business in my private life. You don't make an investment with a $70 million loss for a return. So where's the economic development contribution there?
Unbelievable.
That's pretty offensive. Well, thank you all so much for listening. And please